So 3 years ago today, schools across Arizona, they closed down for 6 school days as tens of thousands of educators and their supporters took part in the Red for Ed walkout. You may remember these scenes are hard to forget. It was a grassroots movement demanding more education funding and raises for teachers. And this morning we are joined by Beth Lewis, the executive director for Save Our Schools Arizona. Beth, thanks for being with us this morning. We appreciate it, and we just want to jump right in here. And I want to ask, I was there in that march, and that crowd, it swelled, certainly getting lawmakers' attention. So do you believe improvements have been made since 2018?
Hi, good morning. Unfortunately, the Red for Ed movement raised such an incredible awareness and was so inspirational to so many. But our schools are actually worse off than they were 3 years ago. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. There have been some modest investments in teacher raises and salaries, but other states have moved further ahead. So Arizona is still funded last in the nation. And I think a lot of folks really don't know that, sadly.
I mean, do you believe that's a result of what happened over the last year with the pandemic and, resources and attention being diverted elsewhere? Or was this something that was already happening in 2019?
Yeah, we've suffered funding cuts for about 3 decades in Arizona to our public schools. And so unfortunately, it's a huge crisis that still deserves so much of our attention. And I think a lot of parents and community members want to help, but they just don't know how dire the straits are. And our lawmakers, do a lot of talking about how much investments they've made, but sadly, these are not getting to the classroom. And like I said, the Education Law Center this year rated Arizona as the lowest funded in the nation. Our teacher salaries are still 50th in the nation. And so, unfortunately, our kids are still being neglected.
Well, Beth, you talked about how the community, you said they want to help, they don't really know how. A big push was Prop 208 and something that voters did vote for here. And I know that there is going to be a court date, I believe, coming up here pretty soon. The Supreme Court, as a matter of fact, expected to issue a ruling over this prop. So are you concerned at all that it may be ruled unconstitutional?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Prop 208 was overwhelmingly approved by voters, and we were so appreciative to see that. I know I'm a teacher and a parent, and those funds are desperately needed, like I said. But it is tied up in courts. And while we're optimistic that we'll get the decision we need, those funds aren't going to get to classrooms for at least 2 more years because of all of these court cases. And so I think a lot of people think, oh, well, Prop 208 passed, the problem is fixed, everything's great. Unfortunately, we haven't seen those funds. We won't for several years. And our kids need those funds now.
So, for the past year, school boards have been planning for the reopenings of classrooms. It was just such an upside down year, right? It turned everyone's life upside down. Our schools were no exception to that. So how has it gone for the last couple of months?
Well, I'm really happy to be back in the classroom. So just in terms of, teachers, parents, kids, I think everybody is starting to feel a little bit more back to normal. And we've had so much incredible support from our communities. I think, people have really come together through the pandemic. And I think people have realized that schools are more than just instruction, right? Like, we're providing meals, we're providing services, laptops, broadband, you name it, adult classes. And so everybody is really excited to get back to our community center, which is our local public school. But I think we're also reeling from the fact that, all of these funding divides and funding gaps have been laid bare in the pandemic because we don't have the money for everybody to have a hotspot. We don't have the money for everybody to have a computer, right? We don't have the money for extra aids or protective gear. And so people are kind of starting to ask, well, why don't schools have the money? That's the smartest investment we can make in our entire state.
Yeah, certainly we saw in 2020 the technical divide there, that divide just with those resources laid bare, certainly. And again, more to come out of this. As we mentioned, the Supreme Court is going to be ruling, the state Supreme Court going to be ruling on that Prop 208. So Beth Lewis, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate your insight, and hopefully we'll catch up with you after that.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, you too. Iris?